Hello and welcome to Market Madness, the podcast from GiveMeSport, where every day is like deadline day with myself, Olivia Buzaglo, and GiveMeSport senior football correspondent. I mean, that says Ben Jacobs, but Joel, I can't believe that that's just happened because it's Joel Beya next to me, not Ben Jacobs. Joel, you okay?
Yeah, I'm all right. I wish I had the news that Ben Jacobs had, but just to let everybody know who's watching, we're currently live on Facebook, YouTube, and X. And if you're listening back in the future, then please do make sure you're following us on GiveMeSport so you can see when the live shows are taking place and get up to the minute news as it happens.
Yes, so it is myself and Joel Beya today, as you guys can see if you're watching. Coming up today, Son has gone. So how are things looking for Tottenham now?
The championship kicks off tomorrow. We welcome Southampton legend Franny Benali to hear his predictions.
Plus, Ben Jacobs will be with us. He'll be updating us on all the latest transfer news, gossip, and inside knowledge on all of the biggest stories in the window.
Just sounds like he's going to have loads of Chelsea news. This Chelsea are selling this player, Chelsea selling that player, this player. For more, I know it's crazy. For more info on any of the stories discussed today, head over to GiveMeSport's website and make sure you're following us across socials, where you can also get your questions and comments into us live on the show. Right, let's get into it. This is Market Madness from GiveMeSport.
So here he is. I introduced him a little bit early, but now it is time to introduce GiveMeSport senior football correspondent, the man in the know. It is, of course, Mr. Ben Jacobs. Ben, I mean, I feel like every episode I do, I feel like you're in a different place around the world. So one, how are you? And two, where are you?
I'm very good. I'm back from the Club World Cup where your beloved Chelsea lifted the trophy. Get that in there early to win bonus points on the live side. Joel, try not to grimace. Back in London, busy times last month of the window. And I think it's the only ever time I've been compared to Joel Beya. The only thing we've got in common, this specimen of a man, this gorgeous human being. How dare you mention my name along with Joel's? What an insult to the man himself. But we do have a beard in common. That's what I'd say. We can both grow a very, very strong beard.
100%.
Yeah, I'd say so.
Yeah, no. And what about yourself, Liv? How are you? How have you been? Skin's glowing. I feel like since Chelsea won the Club World Cup, I haven't seen you as much, if I'm honest. But yeah, how's things going on your end?
Yeah, just sort of like basically just popped back on the pod after the Club World Cup just to gloat about how we're world champions. And I, on TalkSport, Ben, actually, you were on the show yesterday. Wait, was it yesterday or this morning? Yesterday. Yesterday. Yeah. And it was my mission to get in world champions as much as possible, even when we weren't talking about Chelsea. So it was great. I've thoroughly enjoyed it. And I feel like I've just had a permanent smile on my face because anytime anyone tries to chat to me about their team, I'm like, well, yeah, but we're just world champions. So no one can say anything for 4 years. So it's nice to see the boys back in training as well. Got a couple of games this weekend, pre-season games against Leverkusen and Milan. I can't believe it all kicks off next weekend.
Crazy. And Community Shield, of course, before that as well. EFL season, Southampton, Wrexham, what a game that is.
Yeah, unreal. That is a great game to kick things off. And yeah, Community Shield, come on you Eagles. But Ben, as always, there is, of course, one question that we're waiting for later in the show to get the answer to. And that, it's a big one. And it is one that is dominating, I suppose, the transfer rumours right now. And that is, where will Jack Grealish play his football next season? And of course, if you want to hear the answer to that question, then make sure you stick around until the end of the show.
Yeah, you know what, we've been seeing rumors all across the gaff, etc. And I don't know, wherever he goes, I just want him to be able to have that free flowing football that he had when he was at Villa. No one's asked me, but that it is what you miss from Jack Grealish, because I look at the likes of Joe Cole, who sometimes you bump into in the circuit, and I look at him, and we all know how special of a talent he was. I can't help but think that Jose kind of stifled that freedom a little bit more. So I want him to go away and express himself. That's what you want. But plus, if you want to ask any questions to us, then please do make sure you leave a comment wherever you're watching the show. Don't forget, everybody, this is Market Madness from GiveMeSport.
Already we're into the breaking news, and I can tell you it pertains to Liverpool. Darwin Nunez is saying his goodbyes this afternoon at the AXA Training Centre. There's an agreement in principle in place, and he will move to Al Hilal. He will fly before the Community Shield, and it's to Germany because that's where Al Hilal are based for their pre-season tour. The fee is 53 million euros plus add-ons, which means that all in, if those add-ons are activated, Liverpool will get quite a lot back compared to the 75 million euros plus add-ons that they originally paid Benfica in 2022. Now, Nunez actually wanted to go to Saudi Arabia in January, and Liverpool had a very competitive offer, a bit higher than this one, of 70 million euros, but they decided it was better to keep Nunez, win that 20th Premier League title, and now sanction a sale this summer. But the club has changed. No longer Al Nassr. Instead, it is Al Hilal. And there's a few points here. The first is there are Premier League clubs on red alert because Nunez's arrival will likely mean some kind of departure for Alexander Mitrovic, the former Fulham striker, maybe a loan, which might make it economical, possibly even a permanent exit. But of course, the player is well compensated, which might rule out a few suitors. And then the other knock-on effect is, of course, Liverpool need an attacker. Liverpool will sign an attacker, and Liverpool want a starter, not a squad player. And of course, that is very much code for Alexander Isak. I know we've heard some rumours about Bradley Barcola. My expectation with Barcola is that Liverpool won't move, at least now. It's being downplayed by sources, but there he is on your screen, Alexander Isak. Liverpool prepared to bid if given encouragement by Newcastle United. And of course, if he's genuinely attainable at a number that's not so astronomical that Liverpool can't make it work. So keep an eye now again on Newcastle finding replacements, but the Liverpool to Isak saga certainly not over and might start to move now we've seen the departures of both Darwin Nunez and also, of course, before that, Luis Diaz to Bayern.
Yeah, I feel like we always have one transfer that just rambles, that just like goes on and on and on and on and on until the end of the window. And I just hope that this either deal gets sorted sooner rather than later, or if Newcastle can't get a replacement, then they just like dead it in the water and it's just like done, because it's one of those, it's just like no one wants this to go on now. The league starts next week. So let's just get it sorted, although I do not want him to go to Liverpool. So
and remember, in August as well, Newcastle play Liverpool. So that will become the Alexander Isak derby of sorts. I think those of you that are a older generation will remember the guy actually lived that you were saying champions to, the legendary Jeff Stelling. And for those of you that used to watch Sky, there used to be this gag where Jeff Stelling would ask Chris Kamara, over to Chris Kamara, there's a goal, but to who? And Chris Kamara famously had no idea who it was. On social media, if the Isak situation isn't resolved, people will be going, there's been a goal in the game between Liverpool and Newcastle. It's Alexander Isak. But who scored it?
I never saw it.
Brilliant. I'm hoping it's still Newcastle, to be honest. But anyway, let's move on, shall we? Because we mentioned at the top of the show, the Premier League has waved goodbye to an absolute legend as Heung-min completed a £20 million move to LAFC this week. Joining us now to talk about Son's impact on the Premier League and where his departure leaves Spurs is Tottenham reporter at The Athletic, Jay Harris joins us. Hi, Jay.
Hey, Liv, how you doing?
Oh, good, thanks. How are you?
Not too bad. Long time no see.
I know. It's usually, I was going to say, I've seen you more at Brentford, but now it's Spurs.
Things have changed, yeah.
Things have changed, sadly. No, I'm joking. Just joking. Right, okay, let's firstly talk about Son. I mean, one, what a legend, but two, I suppose, how did he come? How did this decision get made? How did basically Son end up leaving Spurs?
Start off with his impact at Spurs. You called him a legend. That's exactly true. 10 years of service and most importantly, one big European trophy, Spurs' first in 17 years. And I think that's sort of why he left. He felt like he'd achieved everything that he could with Spurs. I think there's also an internal recognition that his productivity has declined over the last couple of seasons. I think he only got 7 goals in the Premier League last year, which is the lowest total he's basically recorded since his first season in the Premier League 10 years ago. So the way it's played out over the summer is that Son basically, well, after Thomas Frank replaced Ange Postecoglou, Frank went round and he phone called quite a lot of the senior members of Spurs' squad, and that included Son. And Son made it pretty clear that he wanted to leave. And Thomas Frank basically supported him in that decision. I think Frank would have liked to have kept Son, but recognised he didn't want to hold someone against their will. Spurs have tried to be as accommodating as possible to Son's wish because of the fact that he is a club legend, just from the Saudi Pro League, people and clubs who were prepared to offer more money. But Son made it clear he wanted to move to LAFC, and there's a few different factors behind that, which I'll come on to. And so Spurs basically entered these negotiations at LAFC, and over the weekend, Son said goodbye. I was out in Seoul for that entire mad 72 hours where Son announces at this press conference that he's going to leave. It was incredibly emotional. He had to stop himself at times, prevent himself from crying, basically. Then at the game on Sunday, I'm sure everybody's seen the images. You know, for the first 66 minutes he was on the pitch, he was smiling, he was laughing, he kept it together. The second he sat down on the bench, it was just waterworks everywhere. I think that's pretty much the perfect goodbye he could have got.
Yeah, and do you know what? I found there's a few interesting points. One, that he said in his press conference that the LAFC wasn't his first choice. And I really, really want to know where that first choice was for Son. But also, like you say, what a fitting way to leave Spurs, not just the trophy, but to leave in his home country as well would have been really special. And I mean, I was looking at like just about his career. He's one of 7 players to be top 20 in the Premier League for goals and assists. He's just like, he leaves. And does he leave Spurs a bigger legend than Harry Kane? I don't know. Like, Spurs fans, I think, are very split down the middle. No, Jay, Joel, I'm not saying that. I'm not saying he does, by the way. But we were having this chat because like earlier this morning that Spurs fans, I think, are very split because of the way Son has left. But I think it's a debate to be had. Jay, what are you thinking?
Sorry, Jay, to interrupt.
No, go for it.
I've had to listen to this whole song, boohoo, cry, song, Sarah for the whole week. And look, I do respect him as a player. You can't take away anything that he's done. 100% I do.
I'm joking.
I think at one point he was arguably, you could say he was world class, for a couple seasons or two. But I think that's where I just hold it. I say, hang on a minute. Yes, he won. I heard you say a big European trophy during your statement, Jay. Is a European trophy.
You can't talk about winning European trophies, Joel.
It was a European trophy. But overall, yes, he is absolutely a legend. But we're talking about Harry Kane, man. If you talk about Harry Kane, who's put the image on? Anyway, if you talk about Harry Kane, it's completely it's another conversation. Like, that is next level legendary stuff right there.
I think there's a debate to be had, though.
Yeah, you're talking from a non-Spurs fan perspective, and I completely get that. Kane is an England captain. Yeah, Kane is an England captain. Yeah. He is one of the leading goal scorers in the Premier League. But for Spurs, I know you can banter about the trophy, but your team didn't win it. You have to remember that Spurs have had some incredible players over the years. They've had Kane, they've had Gareth Bale, they've had Luka Modric, and all these guys have left and won trophies elsewhere. So from a purely emotional perspective, I actually think more Spurs fans will now say that Son is the legend because he could have left. There was that season where he won the Golden Boot joint with Salah in the Premier League. He was consistently outscoring his XG for years and years and years. He was an elite player and he kept signing new long-term contracts with Spurs. So I think for that loyalty and the fact he did get the job done, I actually think more Spurs fans probably lean to Kane now.
No, Jay, I do agree. I think from a loyalty perspective, there's not a lot of players that do what he's done in today's football, for sure. I mean, 10 years is phenomenal, and yeah, look, I am not taking away what he's done for the club. I'm just saying Harry Kane is Harry Kane. That's all I'm saying. That's it.
Also, can I just, before Ben asks a question, Jay, what on earth was that love letter-y thing? I'm not sure I can get on board with that. Like the slow music, I was like, what am I watching here? Not sure it's for me, to be honest.
If Cole Palmer spent 10 years at Chelsea and did something like that,
I would love it.
Exactly.
I would love it.
Exactly. There you go.
Thank you, Jay, for telling us. Thank you.
I mean, look, I'm neutral in all of this. I got no skin in the game. Son is a legend. Son has a global following. Son brings a whole new demographic to Tottenham. Son lifted a trophy at the end of his career. Son won the Puskas Award. There's lots to love about Son as a character, as a human being, and as a footballer as well. And I suppose to move it on, Jay, my question is more around the knock-on effect of this departure, coupled, I suppose, with the fact that James Maddison now, unfortunately, is out for a large part of the season with an ACL injury. Matistel signed permanently on the left-hand side. But is your expectation, knowing Tottenham realised Son was going far earlier than when reports broke, coupled with now the fact that Madders is out, that they're going to have to move fast and aggressively for either a left-sided winger or a kind of versatile attacker that can play centrally or out on that left-hand side? And if so, who do you think that might be?
I think they're more likely to go for a versatile attacker. What they need is a playmaker. They desperately need that. There's no avoiding that. So from my time following them in pre-season when they've been in Seoul and Hong Kong, Thomas Frank's mainly lined up in a 4-2-3-1 system. And Matisse Tell and Wilson Odobert have sort of been sharing that slot on the left. And then you've got Kudus and Brennan Johnson sharing that spot on the right. We should also mention that Dominic Solanke's not played once in pre-season because of an ankle issue. So not only have they lost Maddison, Solanke's not fit at the moment. Kulusevski's still recovering from a knee injury. So Spurs are really lacking in attacking options when you add Son into that mix. I think what Spurs need to do is go all out on a creative midfielder. As I mentioned, Maddison's out pretty much for the season. Kulusevski's still recovering. Pape Sarr's been playing as an advanced attacking midfielder, and he's a very good, talented player, but he's more about dribbling with the ball and scoring from distance. I don't think he's got that creative vision and passing range that Maddison and Kulusevski have. So there's a clear gap in Spurs' squad. Obviously, the elephant in the room is Morgan Gibbs-White. We'll come on to him. When Spurs were linked with Gibbs-White, that felt quite seismic, to be honest, because it was the same day they were about to sign Kudus. And after years of Spurs being criticised for being too slow in the transfer market, to sign Kudus and Gibbs-White on the same day would have been massive. It would have been a real statement of intent. Now a month has passed. More players have left. Players are injured. Gibbs-White's not arrived. And now all of a sudden, the job for Thomas Frank is looking a lot harder than it did a month ago. They've got the Champions League, but actually, Kudus is the only player that's come in this summer that significantly improves the squad.
I have to ask you though, Jay, are you happy with Spurs' summer signing so far, how they've handled business? Yes, you're saying it's looking difficult, but if I was to say to you today, like, look, you do have a couple of new players, like obviously Thomas Frank, I count him as a signing as well, by the way, because I think, honestly, like just seeing how he conducts himself in the changing room, and I saw a few of his team talks. Would you say you're happy with how they've conducted business so far this summer?
Not after what's happened with Maddison. That just changes the outlook of it completely. It's just such a massive gap in the squad now. I think it's a fantastic piece of business that they got Kudus in. That was something they really needed to do. There are too many times last season where Spurs struggled to break down low defenses, and Kudus is just so unpredictable. He's a joy to watch. I've seen him play for Ghana before at the World Cup, but when you actually get to watch him day in, day out, you get to watch him in training. He's just such a fun player. He brings an element of unpredictability. But the other players they've signed this summer, Tell is still extremely raw prospect. Danso they've signed permanently, and he's basically a backup option at centre-back. Kota Takai, a Japanese centre-back from the J-League, well, he's been injured and hasn't played. So it's basically Kudus is all they've signed, and then they've lost Son. Maddison's injured. Kulusevski's not recovered. Thomas Frank is a great manager, someone I know well because I covered Brentford for 3 years, and in pre-season Spurs look way more defensively solid. I think they're going to lose a lot less games this year, but just up front at the moment, I struggle to see where they're going to get all the goals from.
So do you reckon, I have to ask them quickly then, do you reckon he will do a better job than Ange? And I'm talking about Thomas Frank here.
I think they'll do much better in the league, but in a way, it's a bit of a poison chalice for Thomas Frank, because what is success for him this season? Spurs have just won the Europa League. So many fans are going to be attached to that. First piece of silverware in 17 years is 6th place, and the last 16 of the Champions League good on paper. Yes, that's a great achievement if they finished 17th last year. But some fans will turn around and say, I would much rather, if we were going to do that, have kept the manager that broke the trophy curse.
Let's kind of focus a bit more on a few names in an attacking sense. And then I know Liv wants to delve maybe into the 6 or the defence. We hear many links. Some of them are left wingers, some of them are versatile, some of them are central, from Rodrigo, but he's very expensive. And my understanding is Spurs sources were downplaying the idea in Spain that any offer had been made. Some in the comments suggesting Raheem Sterling, that would be a new link. 1 or 2 have floated the idea of Jack Grealish. So they're all kind of wide players. Bilal Al-Khanous, even Harvey Elliott, who's in talks with Leipzig, has been mentioned in various reporting. What kind of names do you think are genuinely on the radar, and which ones do you believe are safe to discount?
I've heard the exact same as you in regards to Rodrigo. I don't think that's going to happen. Grealish, yes, I've seen a few people float his name around. I don't completely buy that. I need to do a couple of checks, but Grealish is a little bit older. I think the wages would probably be a bit of a stumbling factor. And I think it's not just that Grealish's productivity dropped last season. His availability and injury record's not been that great over the last 2 years. So I think it's quite a punt to sort of expect Grealish to return to the player he was at Euro 2021. It's quite a big gamble. I'd much rather Spurs, I guess, fully invest in Matisse Tel and Wilson Odobert and give them the regular game time. Harvey Elliott, I'm still not completely sure about that. He's 22 years old, so obviously he sort of fits in with Tottenham's transfer strategy over the last couple of years of signing young and developing them. But actually, there's been a slight switch this summer. Kudus and Gibbs-White, both 25, both proven Premier League players. I know Harvey Elliott's got a lot of game time in the Premier League, but he's definitely not on their level. The one that Spurs fans are going to ask me about is Eze, because he seems to be linked with them every summer. I don't know if it will happen. I'm sure they probably will be looking at him because he's such a talented player, but it just seems like every summer he's linked with them and it doesn't happen. So I do not want to get people's hopes up. Don't shoot the messenger.
Hey, just letting you know, there's only one club in North London he wants to go to. I'll do your work for you, mate.
Jay, I want to talk a little bit about the defence and defensive positions, because obviously there are a few players that still could leave Spurs in that midfield. Obviously, João Palhinha, I think, is an absolutely brilliant signing defensively. Do you think that Spurs need to add another defensive midfielder or another midfielder, and maybe even another centre-back if they can't keep hold of Romero, maybe?
Yeah, so my understanding is that even if they do keep Romero, they want to sign another centre-back. From my understanding, we all know that Atletico Madrid like Romero, but they've sort of moved on to other targets. And for the time being, it seems like he's going to stay. When Van de Ven and Romero are available, they're a fantastic centre-back partnership. I think they complement each other perfectly. The issue is their availability record is pretty patchy. We all know about Van de Ven's hamstrings, and he's had quite a few hamstring issues since he's joined Spurs. They've even had to sort of try and change the way he runs, etc. Romero's availability record is not great. Then you've got Kevin Danso as the third choice centre back. Dragusin's out with an ACL injury, and then you've got Takai, the Japanese centre back I mentioned earlier, who he needs to adapt to a new culture, a new league before we can truly think that he's ready to perform week in, week out. They've got 18-year-old Luka Vuskovic from Croatia, who looks really promising, but is very raw. So with the Champions League and the Premier League, I think Thomas Frank is thinking Spurs' season basically collapsed last year because they had loads of injuries to their defence. I really want to avoid that. So I think centre-back is definitely an area to keep an eye on. I think now they've got João Palhinha, they can relax in the number 6 role a little bit more. Bentancur and Basuma are not perfect fits, but Thomas Frank throughout pre-season has spoken really positively about Rodrigo Bentancur. He's only got a year left on his contract, but it would not surprise me if he signs a new long-term deal. And then the other factor is Archie Gray. He spent most of last season playing at full-back, left-back, right-back. Basically, wherever a hole was in Spurs' team, Postecoglou threw Archie Gray into it. But his preferred position is central midfield. And I was quite, maybe taken aback is too extreme, but I was really impressed with him against Newcastle on Sunday. Because previously when he played in midfield, he looked quite conservative. Whereas on Sunday against Newcastle in Seoul, he was driving forward with the ball 15, 20 yards, really silky in possession and in tight spaces, snapping into tackles high up the pitch. So I think probably the long-term plan for Spurs, have Palhinha as the number 6 for now, Rodrigo Bentancur as an alternative, and then you groom Archie Gray into that role, and hopefully Gray is the number 6 for the next 5-10 years.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea and plan. And Gray is a heck of a player and really versatile. Right, one more to finish. None of you are going to like this question, but all of you are going to have to answer it. Who will get further in the Champions League this season? Arsenal, Chelsea, Spurs.
Well, Jay's out of this, so we might as well just do it between me and Joel, no?
Hang on a minute. There's a part 2 to the question first. And part 2 to the question is, where will your respective teams of allegiance, whether personally or professionally, finish in the Premier League? So we'll start with Jay. Prediction, basically, for Spurs Champions League and where they'll finish in the Premier League. And then Joel and Liv, you can make your cases.
Okay, so Spurs in the Champions League, I think, should get to the round of 16 at a minimum. And then I think so. Yeah, they should get through the league phase, and then it's depending on who they get in the playoff round. I think they should.
The league is kind of tricky, my friend. I know you don't have to be experienced player in it, but I'll tell you what.
You can remind me in February if I'm wrong. And then in the league, I think they should aim for top 6 and a 6th place finish. Whether they get that is very different.
Top 6?
Yeah,
I think that's what they should aim for.
Yeah.
I'm not saying they'll get it. I think that's what they should aim for. You got to remember, Spurs finished 17th last year, but it is a good squad.
Jay, you're being political here. Where do you think they're going to finish? Where do you think they're going to finish? Not where they should or where you want them to.
7th.
That's being political.
It's not being political.
It is. It really is. Anyway. You go first because you guys finished below us in the league last year.
I actually think that I think that Arsenal have to win the league this year, by the way. And if they don't, then I think Mikel Arteta needs to go. Anyway, I think Chelsea will finish. I'm between 3rd and 4th in the league. I still not quite sure how City are going to do, but I think the top 4 comfortably will be Liverpool, Arsenal, Chelsea, City. In what order, I don't know. I'm going to go 3rd. I'm going to be optimistic and go 3rd in the league. I'm very excited about this season. And in the Champions League, now Chelsea are always very good in cup competitions. We seem to just get it and be very, very good at them for whatever reason. I'll be disappointed if we don't get to at least the quarterfinals, but I'm going to say semis. I say I'm going to get to the semis. Which is probably a little bit optimistic given the teams that are in the Champions League. But I just think when we're underdogs, when we need to win, and we will be underdogs no matter who we face. If we face most of the teams that are in the Champions League last season, Chelsea will be underdogs. And we all saw what happened in the final when we were underdogs back in the summer. So I'm going to go optimistically semi-finals of the Champions League. But I wouldn't be surprised if we win it, No, I'm joking. Semi-finals of the Champions League and 3rd in the Premier League.
Now the prediction we've all been waiting for. I'll start with 4th. Chelsea will get top 4. I do believe that they're getting stronger and stronger by the year. I do also believe that in a few years, if they carry on with their progress, they could dominate English football. Yeah, I have to be honest. And I've also said it, by the way, Jay, as a Spurs fan or at least a correspondent and Liv, my favorite player in the Premier League, I've said it once and I'll say it again this week, is Cole Palmer. For me, he's the guy. Doesn't mean he's the best. I just support his brand of football. But anyway, 4th Chelsea, 3rd Manchester City, 2nd Liverpool because I don't think under Isak.
He's not even got Arsenal in the top 4 then.
I don't think Isak moves there. By the way, I think it all falls apart.
You want you to win the league?
He's going Newcastle to win the league.
Yeah.
And first. This stuff.
Yeah, he's looked good in pre-season so far, hasn't he, Joel?
Yeah, pre-season, it's a friendly game, my friend. You don't just move over to the league and all of a sudden start banging in hat tricks. He's going to need time to acclimatise.
João Pedro didn't have any trouble banging in 2 on his first game. But anyway.
Yeah, but those weren't friendlies, by the way, Liv. Anyway, so that's my top 4. Where do I think we get in the Champions League? I think semi-finals like we did last year. Could be another Real Madrid victory, who knows? But yeah, I do think we get to the semi-finals of the Champions League and we win the league this year. There, I said it.
God, honestly,
wow.
He lives in a dreamland, doesn't he?
So basically, if the predictions will go according to plan, it's going to be a Chelsea-Arsenal Champions League semi-final. We're going to have a nightmare show. Whoever wins, they'll go and have the trophy. Whoever loses will never come back on the podcast.
Well, yeah, I'm not turning up if we lose to Arsenal in the Champions League.
If I win, if we win, please, can we make this call happen again so you guys can
whatever. Well, there you have it. Top 4 predictions from me, Joel, and JJ. Thank you so much for joining us. It is always a pleasure. If you want to follow Jay's work, then you can go over to The Athletic or at JDM Harris on Twitter and Insta. It's been a pleasure. Thanks, Jay.
Thanks so much, guys. See you soon.
See you later.
Quick bit of breaking news on Johan Wissa. We spoke a few shows ago about how he's pushing for a move. It's a little bit more amicable now between club and player. They're on the same page. My understanding is there was both a board meeting and a player to manager meeting. Keith Andrews, of course, the new head coach at Brentford, and everybody is now working towards a Wissa exit. Brentford will need in a replacement first, but there's still enough time in the window. Newcastle United are obviously the front runners at the moment because they're the ones that have had 2 bids, a formal 25 million offer rejected, and then a verbal offer of 30 million pounds plus add-ons. Brentford's perspective a couple of weeks ago was either not for sale or you've got to pay 50 million. Now I'm told their stance has softened and that price has dropped. And this is why Wissa has started to reintegrate himself into training to get match sharp. But he's only got one plan, and that's to leave Brentford. If an attacker comes in, let's see if it's Newcastle that move. He would be keen on that. Alternatively, do Tottenham enter the race with the Thomas Frank factor? They haven't yet, but as Jay said, James Maddison has the ACL injury, and Nottingham Forest can't be entirely discounted because they had a £20 million bid rejected a little earlier in the window. And remember, the backstory here is Wissa's frustrated because he feels when Ivan Toney went to Al Ahly in Saudi Arabia, Brentford made a pact saying he could leave for 30 million euros for Premier League clubs, so about 26 million pounds, or 40 million euros for Saudi clubs. Wissa's idea was to go in a year at that point, and he now thinks that Brentford are asking for a higher price than they communicated to him verbally. The Brentford perspective is that the pact was not binding, it was an informal discussion, and they believe they can get more market value out of Wissa because of the fact he's got 1 year left, but a club option to extend by a year. So Newcastle United are optimistic and may bid again. Now it looks like they've lost out on Benjamin Šeško. Tottenham are the kind of wild card in all of this. And then regarding who the replacements might be, keep an eye on Amari Hutchinson. Nottingham Forest like the Ipswich player, but Brentford are there too. And actually, I was told the other day, even though this has not yet been communicated to the player side, that internally at Brentford, they're not against the idea of offering Jamie Vardy a short-term deal, providing his wages fit into their structure. And Vardy is waiting and waiting and waiting for a merry-go-round movement of strikers to see if he gets a Premier League opportunity before determining his next move. So Yoane Wissa to maybe Newcastle, likely a club with Champions League football. I should just add finally as well, Saudi have been there for Wissa too. Al Nassr made an inquiry. Neom FC held talks with the players. But at the moment, Wissa is prioritising Premier League and clubs with Champions League football over a move to Saudi Arabia.
Appreciate that update, Ben. Now, you know, sometimes when we're on our calls or on the show, we can literally see your hairs rising because you're getting minute by minute updates of the transfers. And we also have people watching, the viewers, they demand updates from certain sagas. So I'm actually coming here and humbly asking you for updates on certain players such as Sesko, Zabanya, Eze, Garnacho, Jackson. What's the news on all those players, please?
Let's start with Sesko. Oh, actually, guys, it's Benjamin Šeško is how you pronounce his name.
People have been saying to me for weeks on podcasts when I've been saying Šeško, has he got a speech impediment? And I'm like, player's preference is Šeško, not Sesko.
Yeah,
I'm so used to, well, I lost interest when
off to United, Ben, is he? Off to United?
Yeah, that's the feeling at the moment. So Benjamin Šeško only wants Manchester United. He's agreed personal terms. It's going to be a 5-year deal. Newcastle were obviously very aggressive. 2 different tactics. Newcastle tried to agree a package quickly with Leipzig and then hoped Man United backed off. But 24 hours later, they did the opposite. They entered the race formally, and now Šeško is waiting for an agreement in principle between Leipzig and Manchester United. The good news, I'm told, is the clubs are not far off, and there was progress last night. As a consequence, Manchester United feel this deal will now happen. Newcastle United have actually kept a representative in Germany in case there's any twist. But I think Manchester United made a real statement with their opening bid because they met the valuation of Leipzig in terms of the fixed fee, 75 million euros that was quoted to them before they bid, and the overall package of roughly 85 million euros. Newcastle's bid has been accepted. Interestingly, it wasn't, despite German reports, 90 million euros. It was actually 82.5 million euros plus 2.5 million in add-ons. So my read in hindsight is that Leipzig inflated the bid from Newcastle, knowing Manchester United were coming in, to try and get them to go to 90. They've now accepted 85 from Newcastle. Of course, it's not just about the number, it's about the structure as well. But Manchester United's valuation, at least, we'll have to wait and see on things like payment terms. But the valuation is already at 85 million euros, the same 85 million euros that has been accepted on the Newcastle side. So this is why Manchester United are confident. And I'm told that an agreement in principle between Manchester United and Leipzig for Benjamin Šeško is now imminent.
You know what? I think it's going to happen, obviously. And it's a shame, though, because the position that Newcastle have put themselves into, it looks like, despite the Champions League progress, they're going to be in a situation where they might not be able to have a new striker at all. I personally believe that they're going to have to integrate Isak into the first team, because I just don't see him going to Liverpool. I'm not you, Ben Jacobs, but I'm just saying it could very possibly happen.
Yeah, I think Liverpool's perspective is very much Darwin Nunez is off to Al Hilal, Luis Diaz has gone to Bayern. So we sort of touched upon Isak at the beginning of the show. But in essence, Liverpool haven't given up, but they need encouragement. The encouragement will come if Newcastle can bring in maybe now 2 attackers. Johan Wissa might be one of them. In addition to that, you've got names like Ollie Watkins, but Villa have got a 60 million price tag. Nicholas Jackson, I think, is the one that will leave. Keep an eye on Newcastle there as well. So I don't think this was all contingent on Šeško going to Newcastle and then it unlocking the door for Isak to go to Liverpool. Of course, that was maybe the simplest and quickest solution, but I still think Nicholas Jackson will end up leaving Chelsea and could be sold to Newcastle United. I think we'll see bids for Ollie Watkins. I'm not saying Villa will accept them, but I don't think that saga is entirely over either. So we're going to get a bit of striker merry-go-round movement. And from Newcastle's perspective, I still expect them to bring in 1 or 2 before the window shuts, which might help resolve the Isak situation. And I'll come back to what I said before. There's only 2 extremes with Isak now. So when we headed into the window, it felt like Newcastle had all the cards and there was a third option. And that third option was he's well contracted with 3 years left. He's well paid and the club have got Champions League football. So if he doesn't sign a new deal, you keep him and you sell him in summer 2026. But Newcastle, not just the Isak side, see that scenario now as untenable because they realise that they've got to either somehow pull a rabbit out a hat, a little bit like what Nottingham Forest did with Morgan Gibbs-White, and get him to sign a deal predicated on being able to leave in a year's time. And if they can't get him to sign that new deal, or they can't match his wage demands within their wage structure, then I think it's looking more and more likely that Isak is playing for Liverpool before the window is out.
Wow. What about centre-back Zabani? What's going on with him?
Yeah, very briefly on this one, there's a fee, 63 million euros. That's the fixed part that's agreed between PSG and Bournemouth. The add-ons are being worked on. Tottenham are sort of lurking in the background in case anything falls through. But my expectation is that there'll be an agreement in principle there soon as well for Ilya Zabani to move from Bournemouth to PSG for a fee closer to 70 million euros than the reported 60 if the add-ons are considered.
Okay, what about Beya Eze? Is he going to be leaving Palace? And if so, where's he going to go?
Yeah, I think first and foremost, Palace want to sell Mark Guéhi because he's not going to sign a new deal, but Guéhi's prepared to play out the season, play the World Cup and leave on a free transfer. So that saga's still got legs. We've heard fresh reports of Newcastle. It's not really my understanding at the moment that Newcastle are there. Let's see if that changes as the window progresses. And of course, Liverpool could bid. And if they get money for Guéhi, Palace might suddenly tighten their position even further on Eberechi Eze. But I think Arsenal are going to be there. And as Jay said, you never know with Tottenham. The appreciation has been there for quite some time. Same for Bayern Munich. But ultimately, those clubs haven't moved yet. Eze's keen on a move to Arsenal. Talks have taken place on the player side. He's spoken directly to Mikel Arteta. But when the release clause was active of nearly £68 million, of which 60 was guaranteed, this was a release clause or nothing. Trigger it or go away. Now we have to understand if there's a deal to be had below the release clause valuation, which has expired ahead of the new Premier League season. If there is, Arsenal will be there. If Palace stick to this £68 million asking price, we'll have to wait and see whether Arsenal see value in that kind of deal, especially knowing that Ethan Nwaneri can play in a central area and Noni Madueke can also switch to the left-hand side.
Joel, sorry, just to interrupt just quickly. I also wonder if, I know Guéhi wasn't on the list, but obviously you just mentioned him. with Levi Colwill now out injured, and I wonder how long he's going to be out for. Are Chelsea going to trust the centre-backs that they have? Because Levi Colwill was the best one last season by far, and the one that we know is nailed on to start. So what happens there? Sorry, I just added a name in, but...
I mean, kind of briefly on that, we hear a lot of links about Chelsea and Mark Gahey. The challenge, if they came in for Mark Gahey, is just, is he going to get enough minutes in the long run when Levi Colwill is back? So minutes and game time specifically this year, vital for Mark Gahey because we're heading into a World Cup year. Remember as well, you've got Jorel Hatto, who can play as a left centre-back if needed, even though he's been signed predominantly as cover for Marc Cucurella. And Chelsea still need outgoings in defence too, particularly, I think, Axel Disasi, the one that they would like to resolve, and maybe even Trevor Chalobah. But what you might find, because Enzo Maresca is happy playing two right-sided centre-backs in partnership, there could also be a scenario where beginning of the window, they thought Chalobah was more likely to leave, hugely popular, outstanding and consistent. Maybe they decide to keep Chalobah for cover along with Tosin because of the fact that Levi Colwill's out, even though those are right-sided defenders. As I said before, I don't think Enzo Maresca thinks of it as it has to be left and right. It's possible that he pushes two right-sided defenders together in the absence of Levi Colwill.
What about Alejandro Garnacho? What's happening with him?
So my understanding here is Chelsea have now opened formal talks for Alejandro Garnacho. It's an initial stage. And obviously if Sesko gets done, and that's where Manchester United are putting their energy at the moment, they're going to need a bit of a fire sale. And clubs rightly believe towards the end of this window, prices are going to drop. So Garnacho wants to stay in the Premier League. He wants to move to Chelsea. Villa could be there as well. Price in January was 60 million, too high for Chelsea, too high for Napoli. Then this summer, Napoli didn't make a new formal bid. Garnacho communicated he wants to stay in the Premier League, and now he's waiting for options. Could Tottenham consider him at the right price? It's not unthinkable, but nothing is developing now. Villa and Chelsea, but Garnacho wants Chelsea. It will all come down to price. Chelsea's valuation starts at 30, 35 million. And still Manchester United are looking for a ballpark of between 40 and 50 millions. There will be an initial gulf in valuation, but is there a scenario where Manchester United need the money? It's pure profit on the books, so the price could drop. And I also don't think it's unthinkable late in the window if a solution's not found that Manchester United do a near identical deal to the Jadon Sancho one, where it's a loan with an obligation, wage coverage, but that obligation can be overridden by a penalty. And then, of course, if Chelsea get a try before they buy and think in a year's time, maybe Tyreek George doesn't leave, Giovanni Quenda's arriving, Pedro Neto might switch to the left-hand side because Esteval William might be used on the right, and you've got Jamie Gittins. So I don't think Chelsea are against that scenario of the Sancho-type formula, but for now, Manchester United's main priority is permanence and pure profit.
If I speak. Anyway, thanks for that as always, Ben, for keeping us informed. This is Market Madness from GiveMeSport.
Okay. Well, I thought it was going to be a sting there for a second.
Yeah, so did I. I was
waiting for Joel's little finger clip.
No.
For that. All right. So the championship kicks off tomorrow night. And ahead of Southampton's first game against Wrexham, Ben spoke to Saints legend Franny Benali. Here's what they had to say.
Franny Benali is with us, Southampton legend. Who better, therefore, to speak about the beginning of the championship season? How are you doing, Franny?
Morning, Ben. Yeah, I'm really well, thank you. Getting excited now. We're getting that much closer to the new campaign, and the summer's gone, pre-season's out of the way, and we're ready to hit the ground running. So I'm really looking forward to it.
I like the fact that even post your Southampton days, you've got a bit of Southampton trim on your collar, and you've got that fantastic shirt behind you. We were speaking about this off air. Tell me the story behind it.
Yeah, I've got a couple of shirts up here in the study. The one you can see, the red and white quartered one over my shoulder, is the last game that was ever played at the Dell. Not a competitive game. The last actual match was a friendly to say goodbye to the Dell, a game against Brighton, and the shirt you can see behind me was a replica of the very first kit that the Saints team wore back in 1885, I think it was. So it was got it all signed up and something a little bit different to hang on the wall.
Now, I know you'd rather we delayed this a week and we were talking about the beginning of the Premier League season. Unfortunately, Saints went down. But in terms of positives, Johannes Spors has come in leading recruitment. Will Still has been appointed as well. What do you make of the new Saints boss?
Yeah, I've not had an opportunity to actually meet him yet, but I've worked with his partner Emma, and so she's a broadcaster, and I've done some games with her in the past, and she's a lovely lady. So if there's any reflection of what she's like, Will be a great guy too. But yeah, he's had an opportunity, a summer to settle in and do some work. I think there's business that I think as a club Saints need to do. I hate this whole transfer window staying open beyond the start of the season. It doesn't help anybody, Ben, I don't think, does it? So there's a few names and players that we might touch on that, are potentially going to be linked with moves away from St Mary's. And that can't be helpful to any manager. And Will be mindful of that and hopeful of maybe a bit of business if one or two do leave, that hopefully we can bring some players in to strengthen the squad overall.
Yeah, one of those players is Tyler Dibbling. We'll speak about him in just a moment. But let's get to the football first. Saturday, an intriguing fixture at St Mary's. Southampton kick off against Wrexham. How do you see this one going?
I think it's a little bit of a tough one to call, really. I mean, us going down as a relegated side from the Premier League, there's always going to be that element of you're in the mix. Or sort of, maybe any people that would look to bet on a side this season, they'll look at the relegated teams that came down as potential to go back up with the parachute payments and, being in a stronger position than some of the other championship clubs. But, we've gone through a little bit of a turmoil. We've lost a few players already. Aaron Ramsdale's gone up to Newcastle. There's potentially, Tyler Dibbling leaving, as we've touched on. Mateus Fernandes is another one that's linked with a move away before the season, or the window closes. So, it's a little bit of a tough one to call. Wrexham have just been on that back-to-back promotions, which is just incredible. But you wonder where their ceiling's going to come a little bit. They're managed by Phil Parkinson, who is a former teammate of mine at Southampton in our apprentice days. So it might be an opportunity to catch up with him at the game on Saturday, although he'll be focused on the match itself. There's lots of things. The whole Hollywood story behind Wrexham as well. It sets the game up, brilliantly, really. Clearly, from a Saints perspective, I've got my biased hat on that. I'd love to see us get off to a winning start, which is always good for any team sort of wanting to do well in this campaign.
You mentioned Phil Parkinson. Just a quick word on Wrexham, as you alluded to, an incredible story, flying up to the Championship. And they've strengthened quite heavily as well. Players like Josh Windaz, a proven Championship goal scorer. Kiefer Moore has come in as well. Connor Cody from Leicester too. Some, if we're to believe the bookies, say that they might be contenders for playoffs or better. Others think they might still struggle to stay up. What's your perspective?
I mean, they've been on an incredible journey and rise, haven't they? And I think their intentions are, everybody knows clearly what their ultimate ambition and dream is to reach the Premier League. I think there could be almost like a season this year for Wrexham to find their feet in the Championship. I'd be surprised a little bit if they were really pushing right up at the top. There's a lot of other good sides, isn't there? There's the teams that came down. There's Coventry, Norwich, Sheffield United, who sort of, just missed out last season on promotion. So, with Leicester, Saints and, the teams that went down, it's going to be a competitive season for sure. So I'd be surprised if Wrexham could sort of punch in there, but you just never know. It's football being what it is. There's often someone that exceeds expectations, and they could be in the mix. But yeah, it's going to be a fascinating season for sure.
Goals last season for Southampton were a problem. In early July, Damien Downs came in from Cologne in a $7 million deal, the US national team forward. And obviously some of these players that maybe couldn't get going in the Premier League might be quite prolific in the Championship. Do you think Saints have got enough goals in them this season?
Well, you look at the players that are at the club at the moment, you've got sort of like Cameron Archer, Adam Armstrong's come back from his loan spell. Ross Stewart is in the frame as well. After his horrendous, experiences with injuries over the last few seasons. So he's had a good pre-season as well and seems to be sort of pretty good on the fitness side of things. So he'll be eager to figure in Will Still's plans as well. And then we've got the signing of Damien Downs, as you mentioned, a presence at 6'4", looked a little bit sort of out of sorts in the pre-season game against Brighton last week. But, it was his first appearance at St Mary's, maybe still just finding his feet under Will Still and at a new club. But there's goals and there's options hopefully there within the Saints side. But, Will Still has said himself already, Ben, hasn't he, that, Southampton probably need, especially if they lose players like Tyler Diblin and Mateus Fernandes, some sort of creativity players coming into the club to support the attacking options that he's got at the moment, but also score some goals to keep Saints at the top of the table.
Let's talk a little bit about Tyler Dibbling. We know multiple offers have been rejected by Southampton, seemingly with the club asking for somewhere close to £50 million. Everton are the club pushing. It was reported yesterday that Dibbling is now training alone. Do you sense that Tyler Dibbling will leave Southampton, or could there be a scenario where he's reintegrated and stays?
It's on the back of that news yesterday, and I saw something as well to see that he was training away from the first team, and that's not to say he's been a problem at all. I think it's something that Will still wants to focus on the players that are going to be within his plans, and if Tyler Diblin is potentially going to be making this move, then maybe that's the best thing for him as the player, but also the rest of the squad and Will as manager to work with the players that are going to be at his disposal. So, as you say, Everton seem to be at the forefront of the bids at the moment, albeit it's not what Southampton are quite looking for at this moment in time. I think Southampton have always, again, they've been a club that won't stand in players' ways to move on, and Tyler sort of left originally for Chelsea, came back to Saints. In some ways, if a move didn't come off by the time the window closed, assuming he doesn't go and his valuation isn't met by interested clubs, then he'd be an asset for Southampton clearly. And what price could you put on an informed Tyler Diblin doing well in the Championship this season, staying at Saints? That could be almost like priceless to Southampton as a club in their bid to get back to the Premier League. So if he goes, it's got to be for the right money. But he'd obviously clearly be an asset if he were to stay.
And it is sort of catch-22, isn't it? Because as you say, if you go up, he can contribute to that. And then by being back in the Premier League, his price goes up again, because we heard in January that he might be worth even 100 million. So do you expect Saints to stick quite firm to their price? Because even 50 million would be half what some clubs were reportedly quoted only 6 or 12 months ago. Yeah,
I mean, Saints are in a difficult situation in some ways, Ben, that they're a relegated side now. And, as we know, teams that go down, the financial implications that has on clubs, bigger sides will then look to come and cherry pick the best talent within the squads, and that happens, and that's what we're seeing at the moment with Southampton. There's wages that they can't pay, Premier League wages to players. They've got to sort of balance those fair play books a little bit if they're going to be bringing players in as well, and it's building a squad that will hopefully bounce straight back to the Premier League. Tyler himself, his form did dip last season. I think in some ways it was a little bit unfair that so many of us were looking at him to be the person that was going to be the one that scored the goals and turned the game to hopefully help us stay in the Premier League. But it was a lot on some young shoulders to be the main guy. And he's still a young player. You've got to remember that. There's still a lot of development for him to do. I think a season in the Championship in some ways wouldn't harm him. But it's up to him, his parents and agents, whether they want to make that big move at this stage of his career. But he certainly dipped off, which would probably sort of mean that the £100 million that you were talking about is fallen well below that in a value sense from the way that his form did dip.
Just whilst we're on wingers or wide attackers, you were a fullback. Who is the toughest or best winger or attacker you ever went head to head against?
Oh, I found them all difficult, Ben, one way or another. Some were really quick, some were skillful, some were aggressive, some had a bit of everything. I made the vast bulk of my appearances as a fullback, as you say, left fullback. But Alan Ball used me as well as a few other managers as a centre half. And at 5'9", I'm certainly not by modern day standards a traditional sort of centre half sort of stature, but I could use my aggression, my defensive skills to stop some of the star strikers. And, I was often tasked to try and stop somebody like an Eric Cantona and Alan Shearer, who was a former teammate of mine at Saints. But probably my toughest opponent, if you're putting a top list of what makes the most difficult opponent, the player that probably ticked all the boxes for me would have been somebody like Ian Wright. Just a nightmare to play against, a constant pain, but a fabulous player, great goal scorer, and could stand up to any kind of intimidation that you tried dishing out.
I don't think you were the only one that got done by Ian Wright, that's for sure. So just before we wrap up, let's broaden it out a little bit and think about promotion race for the Championship. What do you make of the other two relegated teams who have both lost a key forward? Ipswich, Liam Delap to Chelsea, Leicester choosing not to renew Jamie Vardy. Which one of Southampton, Leicester, Ipswich do you think is best equipped to come up at the first time of asking?
Well, I'd love to put Saints in that frame, of course, but I think, it'll be a tough season. Championship always is. We know it's difficult to get back out. But out of the ones that you've mentioned, I think Leicester City might just struggle a little bit this season. I think I don't think it's going to be a complete given that they'll be coming straight back up. If they're going to be losing one or two more players, there's that change of management. I think they could be a side that might just find it a little bit difficult. Ipswich would be the one that, other than Saints, that I would say are sat in a pretty strong position. I'd say, they've got players there that have, done a bit in the Premier League. They've got that settled side. Kieran McKenna's still in charge, and that they as a club are pretty solid, I think. And with the setup, albeit losing Liam Delap, could be a contender for coming straight back up as well.
And then outside of those teams that have come down from the Premier League, who's a dark horse or another team that you think is going to have a positive season that might be in the promotion picture? I'm really intrigued personally to see how Birmingham City do. Yeah,
Birmingham City have obviously got their ambitions as well, and they'll be looking to sort of be punching up in there. It's going to be a fascinating campaign, one, regardless of who are going to be the final ones in the mix. Last time Southampton were in that frame, they did it via the playoffs. And if you're going to go up anyway, it's the most magical way to do it, albeit it leaves you a short window to prepare for the next campaign. But, we've got Ipswich there as I just touched on, as a strong contender. But outsiders, maybe Coventry, Norwich, Birmingham, as you touched on, there's so many that could be sort of Sheffield United. I think will be pretty solid again. So there's so many sides. I really wouldn't like to call it.
And then at the bottom ends, just finally, a lot of people fear for Sheffield Wednesday due to the turmoil and their financial situation. I believe many of the bookies have got them as odds-on favourites to go down. Oxford, Hull, Charlton have all been mentioned as teams that might struggle. Which team do you think might be closer to the bottom end of the table?
Well, Hull City sort of stayed up on the last day of the season, didn't they, last year? So again, I think it could be a tough one again for them. But I think depending on how it plays out for Sheffield Wednesday, it would be very sad to see it because they're a huge club. But I think they've got some more woes ahead of them before things get better, and relegation could well be a part of that story and journey for them this season.
And just before you go, Franny, where can people find you or watch your work?
Well, I'm a freelancer, so it'd be hopefully a busy season for me in the Championship, covering Saints and other teams, but also in the Premier League. But yeah, anyone can go to my socials, Franny Benali. I'm on X, Instagram, and LinkedIn. So yeah, it'd be anyone interested in following my journey and experiences. I'll be heavily biased towards Southampton, I'm sure, this season, but hopefully I've got a lot to shout about, because last season, as I was just touching on with Finn, producer, before we came on air, last season was an absolute shocker for Saints. So the quicker we put that behind us, hopefully a win against Wrexham this weekend will kickstart our Championship campaign.
Keep up the good work. Good luck to Saints for the new season, and thanks for your time.
Cheers, Ben.
This is Market Madness on GiveMeSport. My thanks to Franny Benali. Just a little bit of breaking news. We understand Villarreal are set to officially confirm Thomas Partey, the former Arsenal midfielder, on a 2-year contract. It follows an appearance at Westminster Magistrates Court on the 4th of August, where he faced charges of raping 2 women. He is accused in total of 5 different counts of rape and 1 count of sexual assault following alleged offences between 2021 and 2022. Now, Partey was granted bail a couple of days ago. There is nothing legally stopping him from continuing his football career with Villarreal, but the case is ongoing. Partey denies the charges against him. A little earlier, I spoke to Peter Christian from the fan group Villarreal Report, and he told us that he is disappointed Partey has been signed, regardless of the outcome of the court case, and he encouraged other fans to write to the club in protest.
Of course, a split amongst the fan base, but from what I've seen, it's generally been outrage and disappointment that a club that has built its values and its ethics for decades of sort would kind of break all of that in one swing in signing Thomas Partey, because it goes against everything that we've stood for as a club. You see these cases with other clubs and you think, oh, my club would never do that. And now we see that we're signing a player who has pending assault charges. So it's a great disappointment, definitely.
It is a 2-year contract. We understand that Partey, who has been bailed, will be back in the courtroom to make his defence, and obviously the prosecution trying to prove their charges in the early part of next year. So there will be overlap between this 2-year contract and the court case as well. Is that what you find most disappointing, that for Villarreal, regardless of whether Partey succeeds or fails on the pitch, there is going to be overlap between his Villarreal career and this court case, regardless of the outcome?
Definitely, that's the most disappointing part, that we know the trouble we're bringing onto ourselves. He's going to have several hearings over the next few months while playing for our club, while representing our club, our people, and our badge, which does not fit at all with the values of our club. And if, for example, some of those court cases impede his playing for the club directly, it's just a case that we do not have to bring onto ourselves, and we should not bring upon ourselves. But the board is disregarding the feelings of the club and its fans, and chasing for success, which is very disappointing. But if, to paraphrase La Liga London, a good friend of mine, if a signing has to be confirmed in a courtroom, I don't think it's a signing that should happen at all.
Oh, he'd gone all show. He'd gone through the entire show.
It was an automatic mute. Oh my goodness. Anyway, that's all we've got, almost all we've got time for this show. But at the start, we did ask Ben the killer question: where will Jack Grealish play his football next season?
Yeah, it's a great question, and the answer at the moment is that Everton could very well be a possibility for Jack Grealish. There are talks between Everton and Man City. My understanding is Man City, if they're going to sanction a loan, which is not a given at this stage, are looking for 100% wage coverage. And for Everton to do 100% wage coverage, even on a season-long loan, Grealish may have to make a concession on his wage as well. So there's two complications here: getting the right structure with Man City and also getting an agreement with Grealish. Where I think there's more confidence is on the Grealish side, simply because he needs to play. And with the World Cup in mind, he's not out of Thomas Tuchel's plans. And this is where financially Grealish may be prepared to make a concession. With Man City, if it is to be that loan, it has to have 100% of wage coverage, regardless of whether or not Grealish chooses to reduce his wage. City are not ruling out permanent suitors. We've heard links before with Tottenham. They were downplayed earlier in the window, but again, that was before, for example, James Maddison did his ACL. Some have mooted a return to Aston Villa. No indications yet that Villa are going to choose to try and make an emotional return. Again, cost is an issue, but they do want to strengthen on that left-hand side. So Grealish's future is open, but it's Everton who are in formal club-to-club talks at the moment surrounding a season-long loan. West Ham have also held some talks in the last 48 hours, and Saudi Arabian suitors have been there as well, although it's thought that Grealish would like to try and stay in the Premier League or at least a Big Five league. And the bigger picture here, not just for Grealish, but other players as well, is Thomas Tuchel's not like Gareth Southgate. He's the kind of manager that will pick for the tournament, not for the long-term plans, not to try and develop youth, not to try and build a golden generation. Sole consideration in Tuchel's mind is win now in the 2026 World Cup. And this is why Jordan Henderson to Sunderland, he's in the mix. Ivan Toney in Saudi Arabia, he's in the mix. Ben Chilwell, if he finds a move, he'll be in the mix, loved by Thomas Tuchel. And Jack Grealish has been told exactly the same things. This is not just a transfer with club to club in mind in terms of the deal. Grealish is thinking about his England chances because there is still a possibility, even though he feels so distant from selection at the moment, that he could be on the plane for that World Cup.
Yeah, that's definitely one to keep an eye on. I think Jack Grealish, we all know, needs to go and play football next season, but where? It'll be very, very interesting. Right, that is all we have time for. We'll be back next week, so don't you worry, with plenty more news from the front line of the transfer market.
Yes, and until then, you can listen back on your podcast app of your choice. Just search for Market Madness. For more info on any of the stories we've discussed and much more, head over to GiveMeSport.com. See you next time.